When peace feels unfamiliar, restoration begins here. This is Pipe Podcast. Hello, welcome back to Pipe Podcast. I'm Kizia, and I'm really glad you're here today. Can I ask you a question? Have you ever noticed that Jesus never finishes the story of the prodigal son? Think about it. The younger brother comes home, and the older brother refuses to come inside. The father leaves the celebration to go after him. And then the story just ends. No conclusion, no final conversation, no explanation of what happened next. For years, I kind of thought that was strange. Why would Jesus leave one of his most famous parables just unfinished? This week, I think I finally understood why. Because maybe, just maybe, the ending is supposed to be us. Before we go any farther, I want you to notice something I had somehow missed for years. When Jesus tells the story in Luke 15, he is not just speaking to one kind of person. Luke tells us there are two groups standing there listening: tax collectors and sinners, and the Pharisees. One group knew they had failed, and the other group was convinced they hadn't. One group carried shame, and the other group carried self-righteousness. One group believed they were too far gone, and the other believed they were already close enough. Then Jesus tells a story with two sons. I don't think that is an accident. For most of my life, every time I heard this story, I asked the same question: which brother am I? And maybe you've asked that question too. Am I the younger brother, the one who ran? Or am I the older brother, the one who stayed? I always assumed that was the point of the story. And I never stopped to ask a different question. What if Jesus wasn't trying to help me identify with a brother? What if he was trying to introduce me to the Father? That question changes everything. Because for most of my life, I would have told you without hesitation that I was the older brother. I grew up in church, and church wasn't just somewhere we went on Sundays. It was our life. As a pastor's kid, some of the earliest memories are church pews, Sunday mornings, Wednesday nights, youth camps, revival. Church was home. I loved God, or at least I believed I did. I wanted to honor him. I wanted my life to reflect him. Looking back, I don't question my sincerity. I question what I believed. Because if I'm really honest, I spent most of my life trying to be the good daughter, the good Christian, the good wife, the good mom. I thought following Jesus meant constantly measuring how close I was getting to perfection. I always knew when I had a good week. I knew when I had prayed enough and read enough and responded the right way. I knew when I thought God was probably pleased with me and when I thought he probably wasn't. I was constantly evaluating myself. Did I pray enough? Did I read enough? Did I lose my patience? Did I disappoint him today? Looking back now, I realized I was treating my relationship with God more like a performance review than a relationship, as though his love rose and fell with my performance, as though my acceptance depended on how well I've done that week. I didn't realize it then, but I was keeping score, just like the older brother. Every time I read Luke 15, I had judged him, and I thought, how could he miss the point? How could he be so prideful? Then one day, I realized I wasn't reading his story. I was reading mine. Listen to what the older brother says to his father. All these years, I was serving you. I've never disobeyed your command. Yet, you've never given me. Do you hear it? He's measuring his relationship with his father by everything he's done. I stayed. I worked. I obeyed. I earned this. And as I sat with those words, I realized something that honestly shook me. Maybe I've never prayed those exact words, but I lived them. God, look at everything I've done. I've tried. I've sacrificed. I've served. I've obeyed. So why don't I have peace? That question stayed with me for years. Because if I'm honest, I thought peace was something you earned. I wouldn't have never said that out loud. I knew all the right Christian answers. I knew salvation was by grace. I knew Jesus died for my sins. I knew I couldn't save myself. But somehow, I was living as though Jesus opened the door, and now it was my responsibility to prove I deserved to stay inside. The more I think about that, the more exhausting that sounds. Because performance never lets you rest. There's always another prayer that could be prayed, another chapter you could have read, another mistake you wish you hadn't made, another reason to wonder if you're disappointing God. I wasn't living like a daughter. I was living like an employee, trying not to lose their job, trying to earn what the Father had already freely given me. And eventually, that way of living caught up with me. There came a point where I couldn't keep striving anymore. Not because I had stopped loving God, because I simply didn't have anything left to give. And what happened next forced me to ask a question I had spent my entire life avoiding. What if I've misunderstood the Father? That question changed everything, because eventually I hit a wall. Again, it's not because I stopped loving God. I just couldn't keep striving anymore. Have you ever been there? That place where your body's exhausted, your mind is exhausted, your emotions are exhausted, and you realize you spent so much of your life trying to hold everything together that you don't even know how to rest anymore. That was me. I had spent years trying to do the right thing, trying to be the right person, trying to regulate my emotions, trying to make sure everyone was good, trying to keep everything in control, trying to carry burdens that were never mine to carry. And one day, there was simply nothing else. I remember looking at God and thinking, I've spent my whole life trying. I've tried to honor you. I tried to obey you. I've tried to do the right thing. So why can't I have peace? And that question haunted me, because I honestly believed that if anyone should have peace, it should have been someone who had tried this hard. Instead, I was exhausted, and underneath the exhaustion, I was angry. Not because I hated God, because I thought I had kept my end of the bargain. I thought, I've done everything I know how to do. Why does life still hurt? Why am I still carrying anxiety? Why do I feel like I still have to earn love? Why can't I just rest? Looking back, that question exposed something in my heart I didn't even know was there. I wasn't just trusting Jesus. I was trusting my performance. I knew salvation was by grace, But somehow I started living as though peace had to be earned, as though acceptance had to be maintained, as though God loved me, but liked me more on my good days than he did on my bad ones. That's a crushing way to live, because performance never lets you stop performing. There's always one more thing to prove, one more standard to reach, one more failure reminding you that you're still not enough. Eventually, I just stopped trying. Not because I became rebellious, because I became hopeless. I remember thinking, maybe I don't have enough faith. Maybe this whole thing isn't real. Maybe I'll never be enough. And if I'm completely honest, I didn't just question myself. I questioned God. If this is what following you feels like, I don't know if I can keep doing it. And that thought led me down into the darkest season of my life. Not because God had moved, but because shame became louder than his voice. Shame is relentless and it whispers, "Stay away until you fix yourself. Don't pray. Don't worship. Don't come close. God is disappointed in you. Not good enough. Come back when you've figured yourself out." But here's what I've learned. Shame always tells us to hide. Grace always invites us home. And that's exactly what happened in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve sinned, then they hid. Not because God ran from them, because shame convinced them to. And what did God do? He came looking. Adam, where are you? I've thought about that question so many times. God wasn't asking because he didn't know where Adam was. He was inviting Adam to stop hiding. Come back. Come back. Let me meet you where you are. I think I've been Adam more times than I'd like to admit, because I believed I had disappointed him too much. Then I started reading his scriptures again, not through the lens of religion, not through the lens of performance, just Jesus. And I noticed something I'd somehow missed for years. Jesus never waited for broken people to get their lives together before moving toward them. He moved toward Peter after Peter denied him, toward Thomas in the middle of his doubt, toward Zacchaeus before Zacchaeus had changed, toward the woman caught in adultery before she could defend herself, toward the lepers everyone else avoided, toward the people everyone else had already decided didn't believe. Everywhere Jesus went, he crossed the distance shame told people they had to cross themselves. Then it just finally hit me. Jesus never asked me to save myself. He already had. Maybe that sounds so obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me because I'd spent my whole life trying to become someone worthy of being loved. Then I went back to the story of the prodigal son. Only this time, I wasn't looking at the brothers. I was looking at the Father. And I saw something I had never seen before. The younger brother believed, I can never be enough. The older brother believed, I can do enough. One believed his failure had disqualified him, and the other one believed his performance qualified him. One was lost far from home, and the other was lost standing in the front yard. Different paths, the exact same lie. Both believed belonging had to be earned. Neither one really knew their father. The more I sat with that story, the more I realized something. We've called it the story of the prodigal son for so long, that's all I can remember it being. But I wonder if that's even the right title. Because this story isn't really about a rebellious son or a faithful son. It's about a father who is unlike anyone expected him to be. Think about what Jesus is describing. The younger son takes his inheritance. He leaves home. He wastes everything. He dishonors his father. Then, when he's finally broken enough to come back, he doesn't come home expecting to be loved. He comes home with a speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired hands. He already decided who he is now. He was convinced he stopped being a son the day he walked away. But before he can even finish his speech, the father interrupts him. Have you ever noticed that? The father never lets him finish. He doesn't stop and evaluate his apology. He doesn't ask where all the money went. He doesn't make him prove that he's changed. He doesn't put him on probation. He doesn't tell him that he has to earn his trust back. Instead, he runs. He throws his arms around him. He kisses him. He calls for the best clothes, a ring for his hand, and shoes for his feet. And he throws him a party. Not because the son had earned restoration, but because the father had never stopped calling him his son. Then Jesus does something just as incredible. The older brother hears the music, hears the party going on, and he then refuses to come inside. He's so angry. He's offended. He's keeping score. All these years I've served you. I never disobeyed you. Yet you've never given me. Just like the younger brother, he has a speech. Only this one sounds different. One speech is full of shame, and the other is full of pride. Both sons are trying to prove something. Then the father does something I had somehow overlooked for years. He leaves the celebration again. He walks outside again to pursue another son. I had always noticed the father running toward the younger brother, but I had somehow missed that he also walked toward the older brother. The father pursues both, the broken one and the performer, the rebellious one and the religious one, the son covered in shame and the son covered in pride. Neither one is forgotten. Neither one is abandoned. Neither one is left standing alone. And then I noticed something that completely changed the way I see the story. Neither son gets to finish explaining himself. The younger son is interrupted before he finishes his apology, and the older son is interrupted before he finishes defending himself. Why? Because neither speech changes the father's heart. One apology can't make the father love him more, and one complaint can't make the father love him less. The father's love was never determined by the son's speeches. It just flowed from who he was, not from what they had done. I think that's what the scripture's saying. It's never been about the strength of a child. It's always been about the heart of the father. And maybe that's why Jesus never tells us what happened next. I've wondered about that all week. Why end the story there? Why not tell us if the older brother ever came inside? Why not tell us if the younger brother ever stopped feeling ashamed? Maybe because the story isn't unfinished. Maybe it's still being written. Every day, another younger brother believes he's gone too far. Every day, another older brother believes he has to earn what the father has already offered. Every day, someone hides because of shame. Every day, someone keeps performing because they're afraid they'll never be enough. And every day, The Father keeps moving toward both. Maybe that's why Jesus never finished the story, because every generation writes another chapter. Every one of us eventually has to answer the same question. Will I stay outside, keeping score, trying to earn what has always been mine? Or will I finally come inside and receive what the Father has been offering all along? I don't know how long it took for the younger brother to finally believe he was safe. I don't know how long it took the older brother to stop measuring his worth by his performance. Jesus doesn't tell us. Instead, he leaves us with the Father, standing outside, still inviting, still loving, still pursuing. And I think that's the point. The hero of the story was never the son who came home, and it wasn't the son who stayed. It was always the Father. The Father who ran toward the one covered in shame. The Father who walked toward the one trapped in pride. The Father who refused to let either son define themselves by their worst mistake or by their best performance. Because neither failure nor performance ever changed what was already true. They were his sons. Maybe that is the greatest miracle in the story. Not the one son who finally came home, but the Father's heart toward them that never changed. One had forgotten who he was, and the other one forgotten whose he was. But neither one changed the heart of their Father. If you're listening today, and shame has been telling you to stay away until you've cleaned yourself up, come home. If you've spent your whole life trying to prove yourself to God, come home. If you've been exhausted from striving, come home. If you've convinced yourself that you're just too broken or that you have to be perfect, come home. The invitation has never changed. It's never been work harder, do better. It's not prove yourself. It's just simply come home. Because home was never something you had to earn. Home has always been where your Father is. Thank you for sitting with me today. Thank you for letting me share what God has been teaching me. And my prayer for this week is that you'll stop asking, what do I have to do for God to love me? And instead begin asking, what has been true about the Father's heart all along that I've been too afraid to believe? Because the scripture isn't that we finally become good enough. It is that while we are still a long way off, the Father was already running. This is Pipe. Plug into positive energy, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for sitting with us today, where restoration begins.